All right, everyone. Welcome to SVG's webinar, Technology in Action, the first of what we hope will be several of these efforts. It's a big initiative for us, and we're excited to have some very cool speakers join us for this webinar today. It's going to last about an hour. If you have any questions, please send them along as the session kind of goes on. And we'll save some time for questions at the end, about 10 or 15 minutes at the end, and we'll go through and we'll let the speakers introduce or answer all your questions. You know, we've seen bonded cellular play a huge role in live sports production in the last few years. There's no question about that. And as the role that it's taken has kind of evolved, we've seen some new applications for it. We've obviously seen with the introduction of HEVC, its efficiency increase. And now we're seeing it on even some multi-camera live productions for sports, and at-home production exploding all over the place, with bonded cellular being a potential connectivity tool for those kind of workflows as they become more popular. So I want to introduce our speakers for today. We have a couple from the, that's right, undefeated Fighting Irish Notre Dame football team, and Fighting Irish Digital Media and University of Notre Dame over there, as well as from LiveU. So I want to start by introducing Mr. Mike Bonner, University of Notre Dame executive producer of live events. Mike, go ahead and turn your camera on there.
Thanks,
hey,
Jason.
Mike. Welcome on. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Should be fun today. And Scott Rinehart, a longtime friend of SVG, just like Mike, University of Notre Dame Director of Broadcast Technology. Scott, why don't you join us with your camera?
Okay.
All right.
Here we are.
From the South Bend campus, both you guys. And last but not least, Dave Belding, LiveU Sales Director of Sports. Dave, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, glad you guys could join us. So I want to start with a bit of an overview, and we'll kill this slide and just go to us here. Start of a bit of an overview from Mike and Scott. When you guys first started looking into bonded cellular, and you know, looking at it as a potential solution for the kind of things that you were hoping to accomplish, maybe getting connectivity in areas where you couldn't, covering events that just wasn't possible with traditional tools. What did you run into? What were your first sort of experiences? And Mike, I know you dealt with some things at the Denver Broncos and even in previous life as in news gathering and stuff like that. So why don't we start with you? When you first kind of was looking into this technology, be it LiveU or any other vendors, what were some of those early experiences?
Sure. So thanks, Jason. Yeah, you had mentioned real quick, you know, I started out in local news in New York, and, you know, the thought of doing a live shot, you know, you needed a microwave or a sat truck. And, you know, it took resources and people in New York, union labor, and just a lot going on there. When I went to the Denver Broncos, we used LiveU, and, you know, we're sitting there streaming all of our press conferences live. So anytime our head coach or our players were speaking from our facility, there we were putting it out. And it kind of just took off from there, where, you know, we started doing TV shows from remote locations, and the possibilities were limitless. And, you know, there was really return on investment, because we're able to do sponsorships with places like Buffalo Wild Wings that we had never been able to do before, but LiveU allowed us to go live.
Cool. Scott, when you came on Notre Dame after coming over from NASCAR and plenty other you know, cool roles in your lifetime and lots of experience in the live sports broadcast arena, you started looking into these kind of tools, and I'm curious, were they ready for prime time, for lack of a better term, at the beginning, and what were those early experiences, and how did it evolve from there?
Sure. I don't remember when we exactly started testing. It was probably around 2013, and the primary use was to help the FIM folks be able to get press conferences back and to shoot content on the field during the game to get it back for highlights. And at the time, we really struggled with the density, and it wasn't necessarily all a bonded cellular problem. It was, DAS systems at stadiums just weren't mature yet in order to handle all the data that was happening with all the cell phones that were available in the arenas. So it was really difficult. We had very, very spotty results with no matter who the vendor was that we were using. And we knew it was a long way to go. We felt like it was a long way to go, but the vision of what it was really, I thought, as well as a bunch of others that worked with us, held a lot of promise for us. So it's like most things in technology, version 1's never the answer. The development was never going to stop. And the product overall has matured so much over the last 3 to 4 years. It's really amazing, and it's become very, very consistent product for Mike and his team.
Right. So we're here now, and you said it's really matured and kind of come of age a little bit. So let's get a little bit of an overview of how you guys use it. Mike, let's start with you. Tell me a little bit about the sports that you use it on, the applications it's used for, the things that maybe you couldn't have done previously that you can do now. Just giving us an idea of what LiveU is used for on campus and beyond there.
So, Jason, it is used for a lot of football. We do a football post-game show, from the road, and I have multiple LiveU packs that are that travel with our team that goes on the team plane and covers the team, and they're sending back highlights to us as they're shooting. They're sending back the coach and player press conferences. They're sending back player sound. I take that all into my Dreamcatcher, and I'm able to incorporate it with a live show that we do back in South Bend. So we originate from South Bend and simply taking in feeds from the road. We've also used it in other applications as well. Our women's basketball team won the national championship last year. And as such, they came back. They did this parade out in front of the Gold Dome. There's no fiber out there.
Right.
We wanted to be able to, cover this, championship celebration moment. And thanks to LiveU, we were able to do it. And we got incredible numbers, on our social platforms because we were able to put this out to our fans of women's basketball. So those are just a couple right there of the uses that we have. And going back to what you were saying earlier, when I got here at 16, Scott and I had conversations about bonded cellular and from the issues he was talking about. There were some good conversations, and Scott said, yeah, let's give it a try again. And it's really been successful since.
So any specific examples of, the parade is a perfect example, but in terms of Olympic sports, non-revenue sports, that type of thing, is this helping you guys to essentially create content that you simply would not have even bothered to or attempted to because you just couldn't justify it in the past?
Sure. So I don't want to steal the thunder from future uses, but what we're able to do is serve those sports that may be slightly underserved because the facility doesn't have fiber. So whether it's a swimming and diving, whether it's a rowing that we may try, some of these Olympic sports that, have never had the ability to have their games broadcast before, we're looking into doing that thanks to this bonded cellular service available to us.
Awesome. Yeah. And a nice tease, and we'll make sure to get into that, like you mentioned, later on as we get to looking forward on what's on the horizon. Dave, I want to loop you in here. You being the LiveU representative here on the session. Again, we talked about it, but bonded cellular really has made its way into all kinds of different applications for live sports. And now we are starting to see it more and more for at-home production, multi-camera events, not just that sort of news gathering tool, stand-up tool, that type of thing that it really kind of started out with. Not to say it's not still very efficient for those. But you have a presentation here and you have some facts that you can give us and just sort of how the technology has evolved a little bit. So let's hear from the LiveU side what you're seeing in the market and how this technology has become a lot more reliable and diversifies its use cases?
Sure. So most people know LiveU and news gathering applications. That's really where we started. And when I started a little more than 2 years ago, we use it primarily for taking quick hits from sports facilities, interviews, pressers, etc. As the technology has matured, we started to see more and more opportunities for at-home production. We actually had a few of our clients try it, but I want to talk about one of the biggest technology advances. I'm going to try to control the slides. Here we go. So we want to talk about HEVC and how that has really impacted the LiveU technology and allowed us to really make at-home production much more viable than it has in the past. So I've created a few slides. I'm sure a lot of people know about HEVC, but really it's the high-efficiency video codec that allows for high-quality transmission at a fraction of the bandwidth of this previous H.264 codec. Waiting for the slide to advance. There we go. So this kind of gives you a quick overview of how much data you need to transmit high-quality video with different technologies. As you can see on the right, with the H.265 HEVC codec, the amount of bitrate is drastically reduced. Another great example is that with HEVC, it allows this technology to be used in applications that have never been used before. The photo on this slide is an example from a test we did out on a very remote lake in Kentucky, as it says, Live at Kentucky Lake. This is actually a screen grab from the stream from Bassmaster. This boat was traveling approximately 80 miles an hour across the lake, and the signal quality stood up. It was amazing. I would have never tried this without the HEVC technology. Obviously, we were very pleased with the results, and now we have a new customer. Moving on. One of the other benefits is because you have much greater resiliency at lower bit rates, you're able to set the latency on the transmission to a much lower level. I have several customers. I'll use an example. University of Oklahoma was doing pregame shows for football, and they always had an issue with their talent and talkback with their talent. Brandon regularly set the latency at 3 to 5 seconds, depending on the connectivity. Once he got his HEVC units on campus, he was able to push that latency down to 1 second. We could actually go sub-second if you have enough connectivity. One of the big benefits to that is the ability to introduce return video. The large image in the slide is actually from our LiveU Central Command Portal that shows an example of a return video feed. We're able to have two different feeds. One can be a program return, and the other one can be a teleprompter. So the little caricature on the left shows a teleprompter application. And this is really made possible with the HEVC technology and the reduced amount of latency. The LiveU really spent a lot of time in developing our HEVC encoder. We took a lot of measures to really develop a hardware-based encoding system. The benefits are we're always transmitting HEVC, longer battery life. We are actually capable of doing and have done 4K transmission, wireless transmission. You can transmit at one bit rate and actually archive at another one, and it obviously generates a lot less heat than a software-based encoder. So that leads me into my at-home production slide. So this image kind of shows a general concept of what live at-home production is. It's multiple cameras from multiple locations, all coming together back in a central control room, all synchronized, coming either right into your switcher or into a router to be worked into a workflow for recording for replays, etc. So with LiveU wireless at-home production, it's really completely wireless. So one of the benefits is be able to cover, as Mike mentioned, rowing, golf, cross-country events without having to run miles of cables. You don't have to worry about having any LAN infrastructure on site, fiber, etc. You just essentially turn the packs on and start transmitting. So the advantage obviously is high quality video, the ability to cover more events and produce more frequent live streams. And we'll get into that. I've got a short video we'll show one of our customers, L2 Productions, and Scott talks a little bit about how they are able to cover many more events on a given day than opposed to having to move production trucks or fly packs around and cable and uncable, etc. The other big benefit is the reduced cost, and Scott will talk about that a little bit in the video coming up. But as you can see, you don't need a SAT truck, you don't need SAT time.
The other big thing is cost savings. As you can imagine, it costs a lot less money to fly one person out to a venue. We're able to send one person with basically 4 cases with our cameras and our LiveU equipment out to a venue. So we stick that person on an airplane, fly them all over the country. Everybody else is back at the studio. So we're basically traveling one person and hiring local camera operators in the venue, out in the region. Everybody else is back home. So there's a lot of savings from a travel perspective. We're also making more efficient use of our equipment infrastructure, where again, previously we would have had to have a system that duplicates what we have here in the studio out at every event, typically in a truck or a trailer or a fly pack out in the venue. And you can only have one of those at a venue at a time. Now we've got one infrastructure set up here at the studio, and again, we're doing multiple shows in a day or shows back-to-back days. So we're getting more shows done with the same equipment infrastructure, so there's savings there too. And ultimately that translates into us being able to pass that on to our customers. So for our existing customers, we're able to do more with their current budget. So we're able to deliver more live shows for them with the same amount of money that they were spending with us before to do a lot less shows.
All right, and we're back. So Dave, want to expound a little bit about, what L2 talked about there, they were able to accomplish, and maybe what, some of the other people have been able to do on similar wavelengths.
Right. So L2 actually produced a 13-minute video for us. We don't have the time to show the whole thing. So that was
everybody out there, we decided not to go through 13 minutes of video for you.
Right. And I'd be more than happy to share a link to the video for anyone that wants to watch more. It's actually very informative. It shares perspectives from the play-by-play announcers, the replay operators, the technical director, the engineer. So it really goes in depth. But what L2 Productions has been able to do is reduce their costs to a point that they can produce more events for a given client. They've added a sideline reporter for some of their events. Because their crew is all sitting back in their studio in Austin, Texas, they can send out an engineer with the equipment to a location, and the crew just stays in the control room in Austin. So they could do an event in the morning, take a break, grab a sandwich, and then an hour later be doing another event that may be in a completely different part of the country. So the benefits of that is that it's more consistent shows. They're using the same equipment over and over. Reduce cost in terms of, you don't have to ship equipment around. You don't have to send operators around. You can actually hire local camera operators rather than flying your own people out. And then the staff back in the control room, it's the same people over and over again. So the engineers love it because they're not having to constantly fix things that got broken in shipping, not having to constantly have to wire things up and unwire them, etc. So a lot of benefits. It's a great video. I'd be happy to share that link when we're done with the webinar. So I'm going to go on. I've got a few more slides here. This kind of shows a typical at-home production setup with multiple cameras located at different locations around the field. As you can imagine, if you're on a golf course, they're even more spread out. But once again, all these come back to your production control room, synchronized, so you can bring them right into your workflow. You can bring them right into the switcher and actually cut a show, or you can bring them into a router and record them for replay, etc. This is a slide I threw together It kind of shows different destinations. If you look closely at the pictures on the left, you got one guy somewhere in the snow and the other guy on the beach. You can truly go from all different locations. And the key is being able to bring all those signals in synchronously, regardless of where they're transmitted from. And here's one of our success stories. We actually did this about 2 years ago, even before the advent of HEVC. This was an event produced by one of our customers with at 6 different remote locations. And I'm not talking on one side of the soccer pitch and the camera on the other side. I'm talking about 6 different locations around the world. So as you can see there, Malibu, Miami, Paris, Cape Town, Tokyo, and Seoul. All of these transmissions were brought back to a production control room in New York City where a show was produced. So that's a great example. In terms of at-home production, Dachman was really one of our first customers to adopt this. Joseph Marr, who many of the people in SVG know, he was the VP of Programming and Production at Dachman. So he really spearheaded this and started the testing. They did 3 years now using our at-home production model. So Joseph has been a big factor in moving this along and proving it. As I mentioned, L2 has also adopted the at-home production. I want to mention that Joseph he's moved on from Dachman. He's now formed a new company, NECF, which is really, and he could probably explain it better than I, but it's a marketplace of production professionals that are looking to further at-home production across the nation. Very interesting concept. And here's just a list of our customers that are currently doing at-home production in one way, shape, or form. This could be a 2-camera setup or a 4-camera setup or even an 8-camera setup. I always go back to the University of Oklahoma and one of the golf tournaments they did early on where they actually did an 8-camera shoot. So there's a lot of folks out there doing it today. It's really proven to be very effective. And that's the end of this slide. We do have another presentation that if I have Brandon bring it up. All right. Here it is. Okay. So we've talked a little bit about at-home production. It's been used quite extensively in what I call, traditional sports, stick and ball sports, basketball, baseball, soccer, etc. What I wanted to show is some of the possibilities, and some of these have already been done. The center picture there is from the University of Oklahoma. The left and right photos are from an at-home production event that the PGA Tour did. And you don't recognize that guy in the black outfit because his agent might be calling us, but somewhat famous basketball player. I'll leave it at that. And here's some more examples of some at-home production opportunities. Upper left, we've got the grip formula. This is a new formula racing series. All of the cars in this series have a LiveU field encoder embedded in the car. So all those signals come back to a central control room where all the content is switched for a live production or can actually be shared for social media. You can actually go on and select a particular camera. Then we've got a few from a surfing event we did with Billabong. The lower right photo is actually pretty interesting. You got to kind of look at it, but I see the surfer in the foreground, but in the background, you see a camera operator on the back of a jet ski. And that little yellow pack that you can kind of see is the LiveU transmitter. And then the other photos, there's a photo of the Bassmaster event again. I love that, with a guy going 80 miles an hour, and then just a photo of the angler in a little fishing hole. And then beyond that, for off-road racing, we've got a lot of events under our belt. Probably the most interesting photo there is the helicopter. And this is from the Cape Epic event in South Africa. It was an 8-day race. They actually had two helicopters with our field encoders in them, our LU600 HEVCs, and were able to transmit content from the helicopters back to their central control room for cutting into the shell. And that's the end of my slide. So I'm going to turn it back over to Jason.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate it. So we saw just a sort of cavalcade of examples there, and the way that LiveU can be used for a variety of applications. I want to get Scott and Mike, bring us back to how you guys are looking to expand your use of it. You saw some of the things that I'm sure were teased that kind of got you excited about what can be those next steps. When we talk about venues that aren't fibered up, when we talk about venues that are for non-revenue sports, when we talk about things that are off campus, is that what you guys are looking to accomplish with these tools? And are there any kind of specific examples that you can get into? And Mike, I'll throw it to you, and then Scott, I'd love to hear from you as well.
Yeah, so I'm super excited and pretty geeked up about this because I was in New York a couple of weeks ago. We have a Shamrock Series game in New York at Yankee Stadium, but around New York, the days leading up to it, we have a few events and some events that we're going to live stream. Our band is doing a concert at Bryant Park on Friday, November 16th. I'm going to be shooting and live streaming that with the LiveU pack back to South Bend, and they'll get it up on all of our platforms. That night, our band performs on the ice at Rock Center, and that's another event that we will live stream. And again, because the LiveU pack is so easy, I mean, we are going to have the shooter on skates with the backpack on his back and be able to get some really cool shots skating across the ice at Rock Center, in which our 400 member band is going to be performing. So again, the ease of this pack, and listen, I'm no technical whiz, but I'm able to hit it with the hind by just hitting the live power on, and the folks back in South Bend can even monitor what we're doing with remote control of the pack. So it's pretty foolproof.
Yeah, I mean, you had kind of talked about how it opened up just kind of like, what the hell do you want to do? Let's try it type scenarios, right? From a creative perspective, you were able to sort of think outside the box and start thinking of what's possible rather than what you're capable with the resources that are given you, right?
Yeah, so another use case that we are trying, been slightly unsuccessful, not because of LiveU, but we have flyovers for the majority of our games. And I've asked the U.S. Air Force, the folks that are doing the majority of our flyovers, if we could put a LiveU pack in the cockpit, just to try it, see if we get, a signal from a GoPro in the cockpit shooting the pilot as he's flying over the stadium. Unfortunately, that needed approval to put a piece of equipment in there that was non-government sanctioned.
Right.
And we haven't gotten that yet. We are looking at one of our flyovers is a private outfit, and we'll have a little more leeway there. So we'll see how that works out if we get some success.
Right, but the fact that the U.S. Air Force is the only thing that's prohibiting you from doing that, I guess that is sort of the quintessential example, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, cool. Scott, from a technical perspective, you guys, that entire campus has really undergone an amazing facelift over the last few years, and you guys are looking at all kinds of cool technologies. So, obviously Mike has all the toys and wants to play with them and stuff, but from your perspective, how does a tool like this kind of open up new possibilities and make you think that you can do different things?
One of my past, as most everybody knows, has been in sports up until the last 2 years or so when I joined Notre Dame Studios, which is part of the IT department here at Notre Dame. as we built this production hub. And one of the founding early on discussions was, how do we use, because sports does so much innovative work on the technology side, right? Smaller cameras, you know, at NASCAR, how do you get all 4 cameras to get streamed back at once back into the replay servers? So it was always early on that we were going to focus on what is athletics doing that we can leverage on other parts of the university. And with Mike's comment of opening lots of creative possibilities, for example, we didn't do it, but at least the possibility was there. We've got a network here called the Grotto Network. That's an online organization, and they're off in Rome for the last 3 weeks, covering events over in Rome. And part of the problem, you know, when they were pie in the sky and things, is could they do live shots back to here to where we could stream them? And ultimately, creatively, they decided not to do it, but at least we could have that conversation with them and say, okay, if you want to do it, we can help you get that done. That to me is really important as we start trying to apply what we know from the technology and athletics to the rest of campus. And that's how we can leverage technology for everybody else here.
Right. Well, for your specific use case, when this project started, right, it was, okay, we're going to use athletics as almost, springboard, and the rest of the campus has to be able to also leverage all this infrastructure. So that's kind of an example of that, right? Absolutely
right. And then as we're talking about, in Mike's world, as we start talking more about the launch of the ACC network in August of 2019, you know, if we can cover those other athletic events and put them on the ACC network, that's a big bonus for the university to be able to do that. And, you know, our boathouse for rowing is 3 or 4 miles away, which from a fiber standpoint isn't that far, but trying to get the fiber there is going to be difficult. So if we're going to cover rowing, this is really the only way we're going to be able to do it on a live basis, which is what sports fans want. They don't want it on a time delay. They want it live.
Sure. Yeah. Especially with a fan army the size that you guys have all across the country. Yeah. Mike, I'd love to hear you chime in one more time, just expounding a little on that rowing center. And again, these for lack of a better term, non-revenue sports, but I mean, that is what we're talking about here. It doesn't mean that they don't have a passionate fan base. It doesn't mean that recruiting isn't still important. It doesn't mean that being able to present these events live won't do wonders for the program, but you got to be smart about it. So how are LiveU and those kind of tools going to enable you to do that?
No, you hit it. You have to be smart about it, but recruiting is a very big part of this. And when our coaches know that we have the ability to do this, it is such a big deal to them. It's such a big deal to the parents that are watching, and aren't able to attend this. Again, for the team to be able to put a link out and say, oh yeah, here's one of our rowing meets, and it's available for you to watch. Dave talked about golf. We had a really big golf tournament over the last couple of days here, and believe me, there's not a lot of really good days for golf here in South Bend with the weather. But
as you know firsthand,
but there are some really neat events like that it will open up the eyes of ESPN and will have them select us more when we're able to do some of these events, because it's outside the box. We've had back-to-back fencing national championships. If we can put some fencing matches on the ACC network, wow, it's a win for everyone, including the recruiting. So it's being able to do these things that you would never have been able to do before, and doing it at a great price, because you don't have to go through this fiber infrastructure. It's a win for everyone.
Cool. So we've kind of heard about what some of the things that Notre Dame and you guys, both from an athletics and non-athletic standpoint, are going to be planning using this technology. Dave, I want to bring you back in, and can you give us a little idea of where your guys' technology portfolio is headed? Again, if you look at where this was 5+ years ago and where it is today, the applications have just advanced so much with HEVC and some of the compression technologies. It's advanced so much. So what can we expect in the coming years? And if you're going to make an investment in this technology, what can people expect on that end?
Well, let's talk a little bit about the elephant in the room, that being 5G technology.
Sure.
So when I joined LiveU a little more than 2 years ago, HEVC was on the horizon, and some actually viewed it as a threat to the bonded cellular technology. It's just going to make the LiveU bonded cellular technology obsolete. Similar questions are being asked about 5G. We see it completely differently. We see 5G as a huge opportunity to grow our ecosystem by implementing a 5G, maybe a mix of 5G technologies with the current 4G LTE technologies. That's all to be determined once the networks get up and running. But we really see it as a huge opportunity. You can think about smaller encoders, and being able to transmit multiple signals from one encoder. The horizon is very bright. We're really looking forward to it. I would say that if anybody's going to be in New York at the SVG Transport event next week, our Director of Engineering, Dan Pisarski, is actually sitting on a panel to discuss 5G in a little more detail. So, please join that, or hopefully we can stream that for those that can't attend. But I mean, we're excited about the aspects of that. So the takeaway is, if you're not doing bonded cellular transmission at home production today, you will be in the future in one way, shape, or form. We just hope it's with LiveU.
Sure. Well, it's not a shameless plug if I don't do it, but everybody, if you are in New York next week, check out the SVG Transport event on Tuesday at the Microsoft Technology Center. It's going to be a blast. Got a lot of the major broadcasters and the vendors there. Guys, I'm going to give you a chance for some closing comments at the end, but I really want to get to some questions from the attendees here. And we're going to start with Lowell Thaler. Question came early in the session here, and feel free to send them along, and we'll get to them as we can. Won't be able to get to all of them, but we'll make sure that contact information is sent out so you guys can connect with these guys individually. From Lowell, what is the workflow for communications between the director in the control room to the camera operators out in the field? We've tried various apps such as Unity and Zello, but have had little success. What is your solution? Mike or Scott, how do you guys handle comms, basically, from back home to out there? And then Dave, I'll let you chime in after that. But specific to you guys at Notre Dame, how do you handle that?
We can feed it. We've got we have our Riedel intercom system, and one of the outputs feeds into the LiveU server. And with the low latency that Dave can deliver to us now, it's not nearly as jarring as it used to be. Even a year ago, it's much better than it was.
Cool.
Dave.
From a production perspective, I'm curious, Mike, has that gotten better? You've been using LiveU systems for a while. I think at an SVG event you once were just on a cell phone. So has it progressed from there?
Jason, I haven't had to use it so much at this point yet with, okay, let me talk to talent, let me cue talent. We used to do that in Denver. And it wasn't, that big a deal. Again, we did it, like what Scott said, through our headsets. What we're using it for, it's often, okay, press conference is coming up in a couple minutes, player walk is coming up, that kind of thing. So that the comms hasn't been a huge deal at this point. That's not to say they won't be in the future.
Well, sure. One of the shows, Jason, where we did rely on this was our Notre Dame Day event in the spring, which is a 29-hour live event here. And we had 2 LiveU units running around campus shooting all sorts of things. And so we had the camera ops on the IFB line then, and they were communicating back to the truck to our control room. Okay.
Dave, in general, how have comms evolved? And if you're dealing with IFB and this type of thing, how can users expect to get that done reliably?
Right. There's a number of different solutions. Lowell mentioned Unity Intercom. That's one that actually one of our customers brought to our attention. So we've pointed some of our potential users towards Unity as a solution. We've actually had very good success. The PGA Tour did that golf tournament in Lake Tahoe a couple of months ago. One of their engineers actually built a custom belt pack that leveraged the IFB on the LiveU pack, along with one of the 4 channels of return audio back to the control room, to essentially provide a PL system with a belt pack. It's very innovative, pretty slick little design. Actually, we'd be happy to share that information with any of the attendees on how they can do that. We've actually got a little diagram that explains how it works, etc. But that's another slick solution. Obviously, we have a roadmap to include some form of PL in the future. That may be something that is enabled when we start looking into 5G, but it's on the roadmap.
Cool. All right. Thanks, guys. Second question from Charlie Stracker. How much planning goes into each event with LiveU backpacks? How do you check cell coverage accurately? What happens if a site doesn't have decent cellular coverage or hardwired connectivity? Again, we'll start with you guys out there. What happens if you get on site and we're all there in our daily lives, believe me, especially in New York. What happens if you don't have any bars, right? For lack of a better term. Mike, Scott?
Mike?
So it's funny that this question comes up because this past weekend at Virginia Tech, we do testing kind of throughout the game. We tested, probably an hour and a half before the game, and we thought, we could be in trouble here, and kind of kept testing throughout the game. That by the time we got for our post game, we had no issues. There were no issues with the signal that we got from there. A lot of it had to do, obviously, with the crowd and how many people are there and how they're tapping into those cell towers as well. One of the things that you could do if you are foreseeing trouble, and I did this with the Broncos, both at the media night and at the Super Bowl itself in Santa Clara, you can go Ethernet at those places. So if again, you're doing a press conference setup, or you're doing a stand-up from a location and there's an Ethernet drop there for you, you're going to be golden. To play it safe at the Bryant Park event, I am using an Ethernet drop there, again, just to play it safe and make sure I have what I need.
Right, just for redundancy's sake. Yeah.
Correct.
Dave, what's best practices when it comes to low connectivity areas? Which, let's be honest, a lot of time if you're using a solution like this, it's because you've had trouble with connectivity. So what do you tell customers in those scenarios?
Yeah, well, we run into this quite often. Probably 2 or 3 times a week, I use a website called opensignal.com. When I get inquiries from someone that says, hey, we want to do an event in this very remote area, what's our connectivity like? So I jump on OpenSignal, put in the address. It's kind of like Google Maps, but it shows cellular coverage in any given area. So that's a very useful tool to determine whether or not you even have a shot at getting a cellular signal out of the location. As Mike mentioned, all of our units also have Ethernet connectivity as well as Wi-Fi connectivity. All of those signals are bonded together. So there are ways to work around it. There are ways to do some advanced scouting without actually having to go out to the location. One of the challenges is you might show up at a facility on a Friday for an event on Saturday, and on Friday all your connections are fantastic, but then all of a sudden you've got 40, 50, 60,000 fans in the facility at game time, and everyone's taking selfies and uploading them. So the cell towers get fairly congested. We have a solution for that. It's called the LiveU extender, which gives you additional connectivity. The extender can be hardwired or wirelessly connected to the pack. That's actually been used in several cases where we anticipated challenging cellular connectivity, and it's worked out quite well.
Cool, thanks. More questions. Also, keep an eye on the chat. Janelle Fleming from LiveU is helping us out and answering some of your guys' questions directly with a little more detail. So appreciate it, Janelle. From Mike Cronk of Grass and chair of Ames, can you give a sense of the cost model for example, how does a LiveU solution compare to an MPLS solution for a given bandwidth? Scott, I'm curious, did you guys explore those kind of solutions? You know, how does LiveU, as you were experimenting on that front, how did that match up?
I don't remember the full financial testing we did, because that was really the secondary part of the question for me, at least. Right. Was does the technology work, and does it do what Mike needs it to do to get his job done? And if the answer to that is yes, then let's move forward. And I think that's pretty much how that conversation went. Always aware of how much is being used, because that is a cost. But at the end of the day, so far, I haven't heard anything out of Mike and his team, so I think all must be well.
Any comment on that, Mike? You're a happy camper, and that's all that matters?
So far, so good.
Okay. And Dave, again, when you have conversations with clients and they're doing a bit more cost analysis compared to MPLS or other cost-effective connectivity solutions, how does that shake out, and what makes sense for certain people?
Well, I don't focus a whole lot on other solutions. I present my solution and the benefits to it. You know, it's really up to the client to evaluate what works best for them. You know, I tout the successes that we've had, and really the flexibility you have with our technology, being able to go anywhere at any time, anywhere around the country. Scott mentioned early on about a group that's currently in Rome right now. You know, they haven't had an opportunity to take one of the Notre Dame backpacks over to Rome and use it internationally at a very low cost point. So it's really the flexibility of the technology, which is where the beauty is.
Cool. We have another question from my boss, Ken Kirschbaumer. Curious, we've heard a lot about it all over the place. What about 4K? What about HDR? As this becomes a little more commonplace, it's going to require a lot more bandwidth. Is that you know, something that you guys are looking into, Dave, on your end?
Well, we are currently doing 4K. Our new HEVC unit supports 4K. We recently introduced a 4G SDI 4K solution. So we're doing it. It's been done. The royal wedding was done in 4K. So we have examples of that. HDR, you know, is another question. There are still some questions about what the final standard is going to be and what you need to deliver. So that's on the roadmap looking forward. But we're currently doing 4K.
Okay, cool. And actually, another question that Ken had asked earlier in the thing, just to double check, because I'm sure a lot of people aren't sure. And I think Janelle maybe had answered this, but in case anybody is, what about tally? Is tally transmitted as well when you're you know, on site?
Currently, we don't support tally. It's on the roadmap, but I go back to the solution that the Philadelphia Eagles introduces to the Unity Intercom solution. They actually have a tally option. I've got one of my customers that use this currently, and they're very happy with it.
Okay, cool. A couple other questions coming in, and this will be, you know, for Mike and Scott, the specifics around the other stuff that you guys use in terms of equipment for your facility, how this integrates with the rest of your workflow. So in terms of, you know, switcher, you know, primary control room stuff when it's being integrated, what do you guys use in terms of vendors and equipment there?
The equipment rooms are primarily the switcher is a raw Acuity with ROS expression, dual channel for graphics, Readof Artist for the audio. The backbone of the facility is an Evertz EXE IP router. So we've got a lot of IPGs doing a lot of flipping and taking SDI signals in and out of that infrastructure. And then this is, I think it's a 1RU server that sits in the rack, and we take the SDI out, feed it into the IPG, and then it's available anywhere within the facility and beyond. So for us, the integration was easy. It was just finding the right port on the IPG to plug in the coax, and we were good to go.
Okay, cool. Guys, we got about 5 minutes left, and I want to give you guys a chance to have a few closing comments here. In the meantime, if anybody wants to throw a couple more questions out, we might have time for one more. But I want to, Dave, give you a chance first. Thanks for the presentation. We appreciate it. But, in terms of where you guys are at, where this technology is at now, if you had to send a message out to the market in terms of not just reliability, but sort of the applications that it can be used for, don't think of it necessarily the way that you did a few years ago. What would that message be?
Well, I think you just said it. Don't think about, if you tried this technology in the past and maybe weren't satisfied with it, it's time to give it another try. The HEVC has been extremely solid and allowed us to do things we would have never dreamed of 2.5, 3 years ago. With the advent of the upcoming 5G technology, as that starts to mature, and the cell carriers roll that out, and we adopt that in the LiveU ecosystem, it's just going to make this a much, much more viable solution going forward. So if you're not doing wireless at-home production today, you really need to consider it, because that's where the technology is taking us.
Cool. And we got another question about specific cost, and I'll have some contact information for Dave afterwards, and you guys can reach out directly to him on some of the cost models and stuff like that and how that's going to work. Scott, I'm going to go to you next. Again, take yourself back to where you were when you first looked into it. I think you said, 3 years ago or around there, to where you are now in terms of the reliability of bonded cellular, the things that you can do with it, the way that it has worked into this initiative that Notre Dame has had, this campus-wide initiative, and just kind of recap the way that you guys are using it now and how it's impacted you guys from a broadcast technology perspective.
Okay. Well, I think I want to start this out with that technology like this opens up a lot of possibilities for us, and the fact that you can't run fiber everywhere, and there are limitations to a lot of things that we do. Just having this available is a really big help. But I think one of the things that our job is here on the broadcast technology side is to help the creative side, folks like Mike and others, solve their problems. And one of the problems that I've seen over time here, even since I've met Mike, is compressing production deadlines. So the deadlines that he has to work under are becoming tighter, and tighter. And we'll pick on football and basketball because they're the big ones that we send people with. But that game's over. People want to hear what the coach says. They want fan reaction, and they don't want to wait until tomorrow to get it, because it used to be it was by the time the guys the team shot the interview, they got on the bus, got on the plane, they flew 4 hours back to South Bend, get to South Bend at 4 a.m. And by that time these days, the fan has been up at sports networks and online, and they have seen everything or read everything that they want to see. So it's our job to help Mike get that messaging and what the fans want in that proper timeline. So that's a big piece of it. And the other thing that I love about Dave kept bringing up Oklahoma, but that's one of the things that's great about this industry that we're in, is that we're all learning from each other. Somebody's going to be out there taking that risk and saying, okay, let's go do a golf event and let's just see what happens. And we all learn from that. And that's what things like this webinar are all about, is sharing that knowledge, which is so important to all of our collective success here. And as far as the reliability side of it, things have gotten so much better than they were when we first started looking at this. And I tell you what, I gotta give props to Mike about it, because he kept working on me to keep doing it. Let's do it. Let's try it. And I kept pushing back on it because, I've had bad experiences in the past. We've had issues, yada, yada, yada. But he pushed it and says, come on, let's try it again. And I thought we were at least a year out from even trying it again. So we put it into place, and we've seen I believe Mike has seen a lot of success with it, and we're happy to be a part of that success. Cool.
All right. To your first point, social media has changed everything, right? If you don't get it out instantaneously, it's worthless. Not hours later, but minutes later.
That's right. And that's the big problem these days, is how do you do that in places that you may not have the connectivity to do it? You can't send files back that fast. So you got to do something, and this is the way to do it.
Sure. Mike, we're going to close out with you. If you want to follow up on Scott's comments, just kind of what it's allowed you to do, what the scenarios in today's up to the second world have forced you to, kind of accomplish from a content perspective, and how has LiveU and tools like that been able to get that done for you?
Yes, I feel like the possibilities are limitless with this, and it's kind of general awareness. We've told our sport administrators, our coaches, that some of the things we're able to do with having this. The behind the scenes type stuff that you're able to show, you're able to create programming that you might never have thought of before because of this. Like I said before, recruiting is so important. When you're opening up buildings like a new indoor football facilities or a new basketball facility, you can do a cool LiveU, walking tour where you're putting that out. And you're reaching your audience there like you never were able to before. As you mentioned, Jason, with social media and how it's I want it now. LiveU allows you to do that. Coming up, we have a recruiting show, and we have our signing day and our Echoes award shows. We will use these packs because we're able to get the access with some of our teams where you're going to see behind the scenes things that you've never seen before because you just, hook up to the pack and get the signal back to the control room. And, you're going to see, the war room, but not just that camera that's sitting up top there. It's you're able to catch Coach Kelly as he comes into the room to talk to whomever. It's those things that I think, the audience really appreciates. And because of this, you were able to think out of the box and do these type of things.
Cool. Well, gentlemen, I really appreciate you joining us today. Dave, Mike, Scott, thanks for taking the time. For everybody that's on here, this will be, and I know this question's come across a few times, this will be available on demand after the fact. Keep an eye out to sportsvideo.org. I should know my own website at this point. And we'll have some news on how to access that. And you'll also receive an email from us with a link for that. And Dave, I know some people also asked for that L2 video, so we'll try to get the word out on that. Also, thanks to Janelle Fleming, who's answered a lot of the questions specifically here in the chat. Really appreciate that. If you have any follow-ups, we'll try to provide some contact info to all the participants here. But for now, thanks so much for joining the SVG webinar, Technology in Action. Thanks to Notre Dame. Thanks to LiveU. And we look forward to everybody joining us again the next time that we head out on a webinar. Thanks again.